When my billionaire boss Sophia Blackwell stepped forward and placed her hand on my shoulder, the entire room went silent. My ex-wife Rebecca, who had just finished telling everyone how I was too average and overwhelmed to be a real father or a serious professional, froze mid-smirk. There I was, a single dad who'd spent months hiding my double life of daycare runs and late-night logistics reports, suddenly standing under protection of the most powerful woman in the industry. As Sophia's calm voice cut through the tension, announcing that she'd been privately grooming me for a major promotion, I watched Rebecca's confident expression crumble. And for the first time since she walked out on me and our daughter Emma, I felt like maybe I'd been winning all along. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel, and it proves that powerful stories resonate everywhere. I'm going to tell you about the worst night of my life, which eventually became the best moment of my career. It started on a regular Tuesday evening when I came home from work at Blackwell Logistics, where I worked as a logistics manager. I'd been with the company for 5 years, earning a decent middle-class salary, and I thought my life was stable and normal. But when I pulled into my driveway that evening, I immediately knew something was terribly wrong. My wife Rebecca's car was still parked outside, which was strange because she always went to her book club on Tuesday nights. I walked to the front door and found her standing in our living room with 2 large suitcases beside her. Our 3-year-old daughter Emma was crying loudly in her playpen, and Rebecca had this cold, distant look on her face that I'd never seen before. She told me she was leaving me. Just like that. No warning, no marriage counseling, no chance to fix whatever was wrong. She said she couldn't stand our mediocre, average life anymore. She complained that I had no ambition, that I was satisfied being just a middle manager instead of climbing higher up the corporate ladder. She said our modest 3-bedroom house with its worn furniture and Emma's toys everywhere made her feel suffocated. She told me she'd met someone else, a successful entrepreneur named Marcus, who had the kind of ambition and drive that I apparently lacked. I stood there in shock, my briefcase falling from my hand onto the floor. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. We'd been married for 5 years. We had a daughter together. How could she just decide to leave like this? But then Rebecca said something even more shocking. She announced that she was leaving Emma with me because single motherhood doesn't fit with the new direction her life is taking. She actually said those exact words. My wife was abandoning our 3-year-old daughter because having a child didn't match her new lifestyle plans. I asked her how she could possibly abandon her own child. She responded by saying she was choosing herself for once and that she'd wasted 5 years of her life waiting for me to become someone more successful. Then she looked me straight in the eye and delivered the words that would haunt me for months. You'll never be able to give Emma the life she deserves on your own. You're too ordinary, too average. You don't have what it takes. The door slammed shut behind her. Emma continued crying, and I stood there in my living room feeling like my entire world had just collapsed. My wife had left me, calling me average and ordinary. She'd abandoned our daughter, and she'd planted this terrible seed of doubt in my mind. What if she was right? What if I really couldn't give Emma the life she deserved? But I didn't have time to feel sorry for myself or have a breakdown. Emma needed me. She was crying and scared and didn't understand where her mother had gone. So I picked her up, held her close, and promised her that everything would be okay. I had no idea if that promise was true, but I was determined to make it true no matter what it took. That night, after Emma finally fell asleep, I sat alone in my kitchen and made a decision. I would prove Rebecca wrong. I would show her and everyone else that I could be a great father and a successful professional. I would give Emma the best life possible, even if I had to work twice as hard to do it. What I didn't know then was that my determination to prove Rebecca wrong would eventually lead to the most satisfying moment of my entire life. A moment where I would watch her smug confidence completely crumble in front of dozens of powerful business executives. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I had to survive the next 3 months, and that was going to be harder than I ever imagined. 3 months after Rebecca left, I had transformed into a completely different person. I'd become a master of living a double life. One as a dedicated employee at Blackwell Logistics, and another as a struggling single father trying desperately to keep everything together. My new routine was exhausting. Every single morning, I woke up at 5 o'clock, which gave me just enough time to get Emma ready for daycare. Getting a 3-year-old dressed and fed is never easy, but doing it when you're already stressed and sleep-deprived is incredibly difficult. Emma would argue about which dress to wear, refuse to eat her breakfast, and have tantrums about brushing her teeth. By the time I got her into the car, I was already mentally exhausted, and my workday hadn't even started yet. I would drop Emma off at early daycare at 5:45 a.m., and then rush to the office, arriving by 6 a.m. before any of my colleagues. I did this intentionally because I needed that quiet time before everyone else arrived to organize my day, catch up on work I'd missed the previous afternoon, and prepare for any unexpected emergencies that might come up. My desk drawer at work became a secret supply closet. I kept boxes of Cheerios, juice boxes, spare sippy cups, and even a complete change of clothes for Emma hidden away. My colleagues had no idea about any of this. They thought I was just an extremely dedicated employee who arrived early and worked late. They didn't know that I was taking important conference calls while simultaneously signing Emma's school permission slips with my other hand, or that my mysterious dentist appointments were actually parent-teacher meetings at her daycare. I became an expert at using the mute button during virtual meetings. One tap to mute when Emma's daycare called with a problem. One tap to unmute and continue the meeting as if nothing had happened. One tap to mute when Emma made noise in the background during evening calls I took from home. It was a constant balancing act, and I lived in fear that someone would discover my secret. The reason I kept my situation hidden was simple. I work for Sophia Blackwell, one of the most ruthless and demanding CEOs in the entire industry. Forbes magazine had just named her the most influential CEO of the year. She was famous throughout the business world for her strict business-first philosophy. She believed that personal problems should stay at home and never interfere with work performance. I'd personally witnessed her fire a senior manager who'd taken too many family emergency days to care for his sick parent. The message was clear. If you couldn't handle your personal life without it affecting your work, you didn't belong at Blackwell Logistics. So I hid my situation completely. None of my colleagues knew I was a single father. None of them knew about the chaos happening in my personal life. As far as they were concerned, I was just Dave Mayday, the quiet, reliable logistics manager who showed up early and never complained. But hiding my double life wasn't even the hardest part of those 3 months. The hardest part was dealing with Rebecca's constant messages and phone calls. About 2 weeks after she left, Rebecca started texting me regularly. At first, I thought maybe she was checking on Emma, asking how our daughter was doing. But I was wrong. Her messages weren't about Emma at all. They were attacks specifically designed to make me feel inadequate and worthless. She would send me photos of her new luxury apartment with its expensive furniture and city views. She'd send pictures of herself wearing designer clothes and eating at fancy restaurants with Marcus. Every photo came with a caption designed to hurt me. This is what success looks like, Dave, or finally living the life I deserve, or some people are satisfied with average. I'm not. The messages got worse over time. She started criticizing everything about how I was raising Emma. She pointed out that Emma was attending a regular public daycare instead of an exclusive private preschool. She complained that Emma's clothes came from Target instead of designer children's boutiques. She sent me articles about the advantages wealthy children have and how important it was to provide children with the best opportunities. One message in particular kept me awake at night. Rebecca texted, "Emma deserves private education, music lessons, and cultural experiences, but you can barely afford the basics on your mediocre salary. Face it, Dave, you're not equipped to give her the life she needs. Maybe it's time we reconsidered who should have primary custody." That message terrified me. The thought of losing Emma, of having Rebecca take her away after abandoning her for 3 months, made me sick to my stomach. But what scared me even more was the possibility that Rebecca might be right. I looked at the stack of unpaid bills on my kitchen counter. I looked at Emma's worn-out sneakers that I couldn't afford to replace yet. I looked at our modest apartment with its second-hand furniture. Maybe I really wasn't enough. Maybe Emma did deserve better than what I could provide. But then Emma would do something that reminded me why I was fighting so hard. She'd wrap her tiny arms around my neck and say, "I love you, Daddy," or bring me a crayon drawing she'd made at daycare, or fall asleep on my chest while we watched cartoons together. In those moments, I knew that love and dedication mattered more than money or designer clothes or fancy apartments. Still, Rebecca's words had planted seeds of doubt that I couldn't completely shake. And those doubts were about to become much worse because of something I didn't know yet. Sophia Blackwell had been watching me very carefully, and she had plans that would change my life in ways I couldn't possibly imagine. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My father said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to my channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's continue. Everything changed on a Thursday afternoon in my 3rd month as a single father. That morning started badly because Emma woke up with a slight fever. It wasn't high enough to keep her home, but it was high enough that her daycare might call me to pick her up early. I dropped her off anyway because I had no other choice. I had important meetings scheduled all day and couldn't miss work. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed with a call from Emma's daycare. I was in the middle of reviewing shipping manifests when I saw the call coming in. I let it go to voicemail, planning to call back during my lunch break. But before I could even finish that thought, an announcement came over the office speakers. All logistics department staff. Please be aware that CEO Sophia Blackwell will be conducting a surprise departmental audit this afternoon. Please ensure your workstations and current projects are ready for review. My stomach dropped. A surprise audit from Sophia Blackwell was every employee's nightmare. She was known for her incredibly high standards and her habit of asking difficult questions that exposed any weaknesses in your work. And now she was coming to inspect my department on the same day that Emma's daycare was trying to reach me about her fever. The afternoon crawled by as we waited for Sophia to arrive. I tried to organize my desk and prepare my current project for inspection, but I was distracted and anxious. My phone kept buzzing with missed calls from the daycare. I knew Emma probably needed to be picked up, but I couldn't leave, not with Sophia Blackwell about to inspect my work. Finally, around 2 p.m., Sophia walked into our department. She moved through the room with this quiet, intense focus, stopping at each person's desk to examine their work. She asked sharp questions and made notes on a tablet. Some people she simply nodded at and moved on. Others she questioned for several minutes, clearly finding problems with their systems or approaches. When she reached my desk, I held my breath and waited for her criticism. My workspace probably looked chaotic to an outsider. I had multiple systems running simultaneously, color-coded priority charts cover my bulletin board, cross-departmental communication protocols tracked on spreadsheets, and 3 separate crisis management systems I developed to handle unexpected problems. Sophia stood there silently for what felt like an eternity, studying everything on my desk. Her face gave away nothing. I couldn't tell if she was impressed or disgusted. Finally, she spoke. "Interesting approach, Mayday," she said in her calm, controlled voice. "These organizational systems are significantly more sophisticated than what I've seen from people 2 levels above your position. How long have you been developing and refining this methodology?" I swallowed nervously. "About 3 months, ma'am." She picked up one of my tracking spreadsheets and examined it closely. I watched her eyes move across the page, taking in all the details. "The efficiency metrics here are remarkable," she said. "You're successfully managing workflow complexity that typically requires an entire team. Your error rate appears to be essentially 0. Your cross-departmental communication protocols have reduced response time by," she paused to calculate, "approximately 63% compared to standard procedures." I didn't know what to say. Was this praise? Criticism? I couldn't read her expression at all. That's when my phone started buzzing again. Emma's daycare, calling for probably the 5th time that afternoon. The phone sat on my desk, vibrating loudly, and I watched in horror as Sophia's eyes shifted from my spreadsheets to my buzzing phone. "You need to take that call?" she asked, her voice still giving nothing away. Every instinct screamed at me to say yes, to grab my phone and find out if Emma was okay. But I thought about all the stories I'd heard about Sophia firing people for letting personal issues interfere with work. I thought about Rebecca's threats regarding custody and her claims that I couldn't balance work and fatherhood. I thought about how desperately I needed this job. "It can wait," I lied, even though my heart was pounding with worry about Emma. Sophia studied me for a long moment. Her intense gaze felt like it was seeing right through me, reading all my secrets and fears. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. My office. Tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. sharp. She moved on to the next desk, leaving me sitting there in panic. Being called to Sophia Blackwell's office was never a good sign. Everyone knew that. It usually meant you were either getting fired or receiving a serious warning about your performance. I barely slept that night. After finally getting in touch with Emma's daycare, her fever had gone down, thankfully, and picking her up, I spent the evening consumed with anxiety. Emma asked me several times why Daddy seemed sad and worried. I told her everything was fine, but inside, I was preparing myself for unemployment. What would I do if Sophia fired me? How would I pay rent? How would I afford Emma's daycare? How would I prove to Rebecca that I could provide for our daughter if I didn't even have a job? The questions spiraled through my mind all night. The next morning, I dropped Emma at daycare extra early and arrived at Sophia's office at 7:45 a.m. Her assistant told me to go right in. I walked through her door expecting the worst, preparing myself to hear that my performance was inadequate or that she discovered my secret double life as a single father and decided I couldn't handle the demands of the job. But what Sophia Blackwell said instead shocked me completely. I've been watching you specifically for the past 2 months, Mr. Mayday, she began, sitting behind her massive desk. I've been tracking your performance metrics very carefully, and what I've observed is highly unusual. I sat frozen in my chair, having no idea where this conversation was going. Your performance hasn't just maintained during this period. It has improved dramatically, she continued. Your problem-solving speed has increased by 41%. Your error rate has dropped to 0.3%, which is the lowest in your entire division. Your ability to manage multiple complex projects simultaneously has become exceptional. Your efficiency metrics exceed those of senior managers with 15 years more experience than you have. I stared at her, completely confused. This sounded like praise, but her serious tone made it feel like criticism. This level of sudden improvement is unusual enough that I became curious about what had caused it, Sophia said. So, I did some research into your personal circumstances. I discovered that approximately 3 months ago, you experienced a significant life change. You became a single father with primary custody of a young child. My heart stopped. She knew. Sophia Blackwell knew about Emma, knew about my situation, knew about the double life I'd been hiding. I waited for her to tell me that this was unacceptable, that personal circumstances couldn't interfere with work, that I was fired. But that's not what happened at all. What fascinates me, Mr. Mayday, is that this personal challenge, which would cause most employees' performance to decline, has caused yours to improve dramatically, Sophia said. The organizational systems you've developed, the time management protocols you've created, the multitasking methodologies you've implemented, these exceed anything I've seen from executives who've had decades to refine their approaches. She paused and looked at me directly. So I've made a decision. I'm assigning you to lead Project Synthesis, our largest and most important initiative this year. You will present the project at our annual corporate retreat next month. Consider this your audition for a significantly larger role within this company. I couldn't speak. I couldn't process what I was hearing. After months of hiding my situation in fear, after constantly worrying about being fired, Sophia Blackwell was actually promoting me. She was giving me more responsibility, not less. Thank you, ma'am. I finally managed to say, I won't let you down. I know you won't, Sophia replied. You're far more capable than you give yourself credit for, Mr. Mayday. I've seen what you can accomplish under difficult circumstances. I'm very interested to see what you can accomplish when you're properly supported and given appropriate challenges. I left her office feeling like I was floating. This was my chance, my opportunity to prove Rebecca wrong, to build a better life for Emma, to show that dedication and hard work mattered more than natural advantages or wealthy connections. But my excitement lasted only until that afternoon when I checked my email. Waiting in my inbox was a message that made my blood turn to ice. The sender was Patterson & Associates Legal Services, and the subject line read, regarding custody modification for minor child Emma Mayday. I opened the email with shaking hands. Inside was a formal legal letter from Rebecca's attorney. The letter stated that Rebecca was filing for a modification of our custody arrangement. It claimed that my work-life instability and insufficient financial resources created an environment that was potentially detrimental to the minor child's welfare and development. It listed all my supposed inadequacies: long work hours, reliance on daycare instead of private education, modest living conditions, inability to provide enrichment activities, and cultural advantages. The letter concluded by stating that Rebecca was seeking primary custody of Emma, with me receiving only supervised visitation rights. I read the letter 3 times, feeling sicker with each reading. Rebecca was using my dedication to my career, the same dedication Sophia had just praised, as a weapon against me. She was claiming that working hard to provide for Emma made me an unfit father, and the corporate retreat where I was supposed to present my career-making project, that was now the most dangerous weekend of my life, because I'd have to be away from Emma overnight, which Rebecca's lawyer would probably use as more evidence that I couldn't properly care for my daughter. I had no idea that the corporate retreat would indeed become the most important weekend of my life, but not in the way I feared. What was about to happen there would shock everyone, especially Rebecca, and would prove once and for all whether dedication and hard work could triumph over wealth and privilege. The Blackwell Industries annual corporate retreat took place at an exclusive mountain resort that looked like something from a luxury magazine. The main building was all stone and glass with spectacular views of snow-capped peaks. The rooms were enormous and elegant. The restaurants served food I couldn't even pronounce. This was a world where successful executives gathered to network and make deals that would affect thousands of employees and millions of dollars. I felt completely out of place. While other attendees arrived in expensive cars wearing designer suits, I showed up in my rental car wearing the best suit I owned, which was still obviously cheaper than what everyone else was wearing. But I told myself it didn't matter. I was here because Sophia Blackwell herself had chosen me to present the company's most important project. I belonged here just as much as anyone else. Before leaving for the retreat, I'd arranged for Emma to stay with my parents for the weekend. I'd triple-checked that they had all the emergency contact numbers, Emma's favorite foods, her bedtime routine written out, and instructions for every possible situation. My mother had assured me multiple times that Emma would be fine, that I should focus on my presentation and not worry. But I worried anyway. I worried about Emma. I worried about my presentation. And I worried about Rebecca's custody filing, which hung over me like a dark cloud. The retreat began with a cocktail reception on Friday evening. I walked into the reception hall trying to look confident, carrying the presentation folder that represented months of work. I made small talk with colleagues, accepted congratulations from people who'd heard about my project assignment, and tried to calm my nerves about the presentation schedule for Saturday morning. Then I saw Rebecca walk in, and my entire world tilted sideways. She entered the reception hall on the arm of Marcus Hendrick, the rival executive she'd left me for. She was dressed in an expensive designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair and makeup were perfect. She radiated confidence and success. Marcus Hendrick, wearing a suit that probably cost thousands of dollars, looked equally polished and powerful. I learned from overhearing conversations that Marcus was attending the retreat as part of preliminary merger talks between his company and Blackwell Industries. He was there as Sophia's invited guest, and he brought Rebecca as his +1. This was no coincidence. Rebecca hadn't ended up at my corporate retreat by accident. She positioned herself here deliberately, with specific intentions. "Dave," Rebecca called out when she spotted me, her voice loud enough that several people turned to look. "What a surprise seeing you here. Marcus, this is my ex-husband. He works in, what was it again, Dave? Middle management? Logistics something. Logistics management," I said calmly, refusing to show her that her condescension bothered me. "How nice," Rebecca said with a fake smile. "You must be so proud. Marcus here is VP of Strategic Operations at Henderson Industries. Isn't that right, darling?" Marcus nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable with Rebecca's obvious attempt to create a comparison between us. But Rebecca wasn't finished. Over the next hour, I watched her work the room like a professional networker. She approached board members, senior executives, and influential decision-makers. She engaged them in seemingly casual conversations, but I could hear enough fragments to know what she was doing. She was planting seeds of doubt about me. To one board member, I heard her say, "Single parenthood is so challenging, isn't it? I worry about people trying to balance such demanding personal situations with professional responsibilities." To another executive, she mentioned, "Some people are so overwhelmed by their circumstances that they can't possibly give their full attention to their work, you know?" To a senior vice president, she casually commented, "I admire people who recognize their limitations. It takes courage to admit when you're in over your head." She never mentioned me by name during these conversations. She didn't have to. She was creating an atmosphere of doubt, making people question whether someone dealing with difficult personal circumstances, someone like me, could handle major professional responsibilities. I couldn't confront her without making a scene. I couldn't defend myself without confirming that, yes, I was the overwhelmed single parent she was subtly describing. So I stood there feeling helpless, watching her systematically undermine everything I'd worked for. The formal dinner that evening was even worse. The resort's main dining hall had been set up with elegant round tables, beautiful centerpieces, and placed cards indicating where everyone should sit. I found my assigned seat at a table with other mid-level managers, people at my level in the company hierarchy. Meanwhile, Rebecca and Marcus sat near the executive tables at the front of the room, surrounded by senior leadership and board members. Throughout dinner, Rebecca's laughter carried across the room. She was charming and engaging, telling stories that had executives smiling and nodding. She was building relationships and creating alliances. And I absolutely knew, that she was positioning herself to cause maximum damage to my reputation and my custody case. My presentation was scheduled for 9 a.m. the next morning, just 14 hours away. 14 hours for Rebecca to continue planting doubts in people's minds. 14 hours for her to build her case that I was an overwhelmed, inadequate father who couldn't possibly handle professional responsibilities. I barely touched my dinner. My stomach was in knots. Everything I'd worked for, the presentation, the potential promotion, my chance to provide a better life for Emma, was crumbling before it even began. Then, just as dessert was being served, Rebecca stood up. "Excuse me, everyone," she called out, tapping her wine glass with a spoon to get attention. The room gradually quieted, all eyes turning toward her. "I'd like to make a toast." People lifted their glasses, expecting a simple thank you to the host or a generic tribute to business success. "To new beginnings," Rebecca said, raising her glass high, "and to the courage to pursue excellence instead of settling for mediocrity." Several people echoed the toast and took sips of their drinks. But Rebecca wasn't finished speaking. "You know," she continued, her voice taking on a more intimate, conversational tone, "I've been thinking a lot lately about honesty and courage, about having the strength to admit when we're overwhelmed, when we're struggling, when we're in over our heads." My chest tightened. Every muscle in my body tensed. I knew exactly where this was going. "Take my ex-husband Dave, for example," Rebecca said, gesturing toward me with her wine glass. Every single person in the room turned to look at me. Dozens of pairs of eyes, including those of senior executives, board members, and Sophia Blackwell herself. "Dave is here tonight trying to prove himself professionally," Rebecca continued, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "But the truth, the honest truth, is that he's barely keeping his head above water. The poor man is struggling as a single father, barely managing basic childcare arrangements, let alone the kind of executive responsibilities this company demands." People were murmuring now. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked curious. I sat frozen in my chair, unable to move or speak. "In fact," Rebecca said, pulling out her phone, "I have documentation here from my attorney that outlines Dave's unstable work-life balance and insufficient resources for properly caring for our daughter. We're filing for a custody modification because his situation has become detrimental to Emma's welfare." She held up her phone as if the legal documents there proved her point. It's sad, really, but sometimes people just aren't equipped for the responsibilities they take on. Sometimes they need to admit their limitations before. That's enough. The voice cut through the room like a knife through butter, sharp, cold, and absolutely commanding. Sophia Blackwell had risen from her seat at the head table. Every person in the room immediately fell silent. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Even Rebecca stopped mid-sentence, turning to look at Sophia with her mouth still half open. "Ms. Mayday," Sophia said, her voice perfectly calm, but carrying an edge that made people nervous. "You've resumed using your maiden name since your divorce, haven't you?" "How progressive." Rebecca nodded slowly, clearly uncertain where this was going. "You spent the last several minutes making serious accusations about one of my employees," Sophia continued, walking slowly from the head table toward the center of the room. "You questioned his capabilities, his judgment, and his fitness for both professional and personal responsibilities. I think it's only fair that we address these accusations directly and publicly, don't you agree?" Rebecca's confident smile faltered slightly, but she tried to maintain her composure. "I'm simply stating facts, Ms. Blackwell. Dave is a dedicated father. I'll give him that much. But he's clearly overwhelmed by his circumstances. Anyone can see that he's struggling to balance." "What I see," Sophia interrupted, her voice cutting through Rebecca's words like steel, "is that you fundamentally misunderstand what creates value in business. You spent this entire evening questioning David Mayday's capabilities based solely on his personal circumstances. So let me share some facts of my own, actual facts based on data and performance metrics, not biased opinions." The entire room was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. I sat at my table completely paralyzed, unable to process what was happening. 3 months ago, I noticed something interesting about Mr. Mayday's work performance, Sophia said, now standing in the center of the room where everyone could see and hear her clearly. His efficiency ratings had increased by 41%. His error rate had dropped to 0.3%, the lowest in his entire division, and actually among the lowest in the entire company. His problem-solving speed had nearly doubled. His ability to manage complex, simultaneous projects had become exceptional. She paused, letting those facts sink in throughout the room. People were listening intently now, completely focused on Sophia's words. "I was curious about what had caused this remarkable improvement," Sophia continued. "So I researched Mr. Mayday's personal circumstances. What I discovered was that he had recently become a single father with full custody of a young child. And rather than allowing that responsibility to diminish his professional capabilities, as you seem to assume it should have, he developed organizational systems, time management protocols, and multitasking methodologies that exceeded anything I'd seen from executives with 20 years more experience." Rebecca's face had gone pale. Marcus Hendrick looked distinctly uncomfortable, his eyes darting toward the nearest exit. "So I made a decision," Sophia said, her gaze now shifting directly to me. "For the past 2 months, I have been privately mentoring David Mayday. I've been preparing him for a promotion to Senior Director of Operational Excellence, a position that comes with salary increase of 63%, comprehensive executive benefits, flexible remote work options, and the kind of resources that will allow him to provide exceptionally well for his daughter." My heart stopped. The room erupted in murmurs of surprise. A 63% salary increase? Senior Director? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sophia held up her hand for silence, and the room immediately quieted. "But that's not all," she continued, and now there was something almost dangerous in her smile. "The project Mr. Mayday is presenting tomorrow morning isn't actually an audition or a test. It's an announcement. Dave Mayday will be leading our new Work-Life Innovation Initiative, a comprehensive company-wide program that will restructure our approach to employee welfare, work-life balance, and performance optimization. This program is based entirely on the systems and methodologies he developed while managing his responsibilities as a single parent." The room exploded with surprised reactions. Executives were looking at each other with raised eyebrows. Board members were nodding approvingly. Several people started clapping, but Sophia wasn't finished. "This initiative will be our flagship program," she announced, speaking over the applause. "It will be featured in all major business publications. Mr. Mayday will be the public face of this initiative, representing Blackwell Industries at conferences and speaking at industry events. His story and his methods will be promoted as examples of how modern business can succeed by supporting employees through life challenges rather than punishing them for having personal responsibilities. The applause grew louder. People were standing now. The board members at the front tables were clapping enthusiastically. Sophia turned to face Rebecca directly. "As for your custody concerns, Ms. Mayday," she said, her voice cool and precise, "I think you'll find that Mr. Mayday's insufficient resources are about to become significantly less insufficient. His salary will be more than adequate to provide excellent child care, educational opportunities, and enrichment activities for your daughter. And his unstable work-life balance?" She paused for effect. "Well, he's about to become the expert consultant that this entire company, and eventually this entire industry, will be learning from regarding exactly that topic." Sophia let that sink in for a moment before continuing. "Any family court judge would be hard-pressed to argue that being promoted to senior director and leading a nationally recognized work-life initiative is somehow detrimental to a child's welfare. Wouldn't you agree?" Rebecca stood frozen, her wine glass still raised in her hand, her mouth slightly open, unable to formulate any response. Then Sophia walked directly over to where I sat, placed her perfectly manicured hand on my shoulder, and said loud enough for everyone in the room to hear, "Welcome to the leadership team, Dave. Your daughter should be very proud of you." "I know I am." The room erupted in applause again. This time it was louder and more sustained. People were standing, clapping, even whistling. Executives from the front tables were walking over to congratulate me. Board members were nodding with approval. My fellow mid-level managers at my table were shaking my hand and patting my back, but I barely noticed any of them. All I could focus on was Rebecca, still standing in the middle of the room with her raised wine glass, her smug expression completely gone, replaced by shock and disbelief. Marcus Hendrick had already disappeared, presumably heading toward the bar or the exit, clearly wanting no part of the fallout from Rebecca's humiliation. For months, Rebecca had sent me messages telling me I was average, ordinary, insufficient. She'd mocked my modest lifestyle and my middle management position. She claimed I couldn't possibly give Emma the life she deserved. She threatened to take Emma away from me because I supposedly didn't have the resources to be a proper father. And now, in front of dozens of powerful business executives and board members, she'd been proven completely wrong. My dedication to Emma, the very thing Rebecca had used as a weapon against me, had become my greatest professional strength. The challenges I'd faced as a single father had made me better at my job, not worse. And the woman who called me too ordinary and average to succeed was standing there watching as I received a major promotion and became the face of a company-wide initiative. The rest of that evening was a blur. People kept coming up to congratulate me, ask questions about my new role, and tell me they'd always known I had potential. Some people made excuses about needing to leave early, Rebecca and Marcus among them. I watched them slip out of the dining hall, Rebecca's designer dress and confident posture somehow looking deflated and diminished. Later that night, after the formal dinner ended and people dispersed to the resort's various lounges and bars, I stood alone on the balcony of my hotel room. I looked out at the mountains, dark against the night sky, and tried to process everything that had happened. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother with a photo attached. The image showed Emma asleep in her princess pajamas, clutching her favorite stuffed bear, her face peaceful and content. The message read, "She wanted you to know she loves you to the moon and back. She can't wait to see you tomorrow." I saved the photo and smiled, a real, genuine smile for the first time in months. Rebecca had been wrong about everything. I wasn't too ordinary or too average or too overwhelmed. I was exactly what Emma needed me to be. A father who never gave up, who turned challenges into strengths, who proved that dedication and love were worth more than designer clothes and luxury apartments and impressive job titles. Tomorrow I would present the program that would change my career and my life. Tomorrow I would officially become senior director and take on responsibilities I'd never imagined having. Tomorrow I would start building the life I'd always wanted to give Emma, a life where she would have opportunities and advantages. Not because we were wealthy or privileged, but because her father had worked hard and refused to accept defeat. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply stand on that balcony and feel proud. Proud of surviving the hardest 3 months of my life. Proud of proving that being a good father didn't make me weaker in the business world. It made me stronger. Proud of showing Rebecca and everyone else that ordinary people who work hard and stay dedicated can achieve extraordinary things. And somewhere in that fancy mountain resort, Rebecca was having a very different night. A night where she was realizing that leaving me and Emma had been the biggest mistake of her life. A night where she was understanding that success isn't measured by designer clothes or luxury apartments or wealthy boyfriends, but by character, dedication, and the ability to overcome challenges. I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't felt since Rebecca walked out. Genuine hope for the future. And when I woke up the next morning to present my project to the entire company leadership, I did so with confidence, knowing that I'd already proven everything that mattered. Rebecca had called me average and ordinary, but Sophia Blackwell, one of the most successful CEOs in the world, had seen something different. She'd seen potential, capability, and strength. And she'd been right. The promotion, the salary increase, the new position, all of that was wonderful and life-changing. But the real victory was simpler and more important. I'd proven to myself, to Emma, and to the world that being a dedicated father wasn't a weakness or a limitation. It was my greatest strength, and that was worth more than anything Rebecca could ever understand. Dave's story teaches us several powerful lessons about life, work, and resilience. First, never let other people's negative opinions define your worth. Rebecca called Dave average and ordinary, but those supposed weaknesses became his greatest strengths. Second, challenges don't have to destroy you. They can transform you into someone stronger and more capable if you face them with determination. Third, dedication and hard work are noticed, even when you think nobody is watching. Sophia saw Dave's efforts long before he realized it. Fourth, true success isn't measured by designer clothes, luxury apartments, or impressive titles, but by character, integrity, and the ability to overcome obstacles. Finally, being a good parent and a good professional aren't opposing goals. The skills and dedication required for one can actually make you better at the other. Dave proved that you don't need to be extraordinary to achieve extraordinary things. You just need to refuse to give up, stay committed to what matters, and trust that your efforts will eventually be recognized and rewarded. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to Dave's story of going from humiliated single father to senior director and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. Kindly support what I do here by subscribing. And then drop in the comment section if you like part 2 of Dave and Emma's story. What happens when Rebecca tries to fight back against the promotion? How will Dave handle his new responsibilities while co-parenting? Will Sophia's mentorship lead to even bigger opportunities? Let me know if you want to hear more.